Hi guys, this is another podcast episode with Horsemanship from Ginny. I'm Yaz, and today I'm going to be talking about a horse called Fernley. So, Fernley is a horse I started working with a couple of years ago now, I think. Not summer just gone, summer before. And his owner Beth messaged me asking for help with his loading issues. So I went down to have a look. Initially, she just paid for one of the single sessions just to see how he would get on. And it very quickly became obvious that Fernley was not an easy horse to load and he was going to take a while. So at the time, my loading course was £600 and it would take as long as it takes to fix the horse. And Fernley is the reason that all changed. And I put a 10-session limit on my loading courses because holy hell did Fernley take a long time to learn how to load. He was an interesting case, to say the least. So most horses when loading, and I've talked about this in some of the videos that I've made, they find it hard to balance on the ramp. They don't like to stop on the ramp. They don't like it once their back feet are on the ramp. And that's usually where you start to see your horses refuse to come onto the ramp, is because once their back feet are on, they must go forward or fly backwards and potentially hurt themselves. So oftentimes once you teach the horse to be able to safely back on and off the ramp, that's your problem solved, and the horses more often than not load quite well from there. And if you've got some claustrophobia issues, that's not too tricky to fix. So yeah, Fernley took a long time. In what most horses would learn in one session, Fernley would take 6. And he very much felt like he believed he didn't fit in the lorry, and this lorry easily fit him, but I was constantly feeling like I was, he didn't feel like he fit in there. He felt very like he was it was a small space, don't get me wrong, but it was plenty of space for him. He didn't struggle to fit in there at all. It was a 3.5 ton rear facing lorry, and he got to put his head over the bar into the storage or living area, whatever you want to call it. So there wasn't really any issues with space. There are a few lorries I've seen and I've gone, you'd probably have less issues loading your horse if you bought a bigger lorry, because your horse is very long and there's not a lot of space for him. Fernley wasn't one of those horses. It was plenty of space for him, and he definitely felt like he didn't have enough space in there, which was weird on its own, but Fernley had a lot of quirky personality traits, so yeah, that wasn't uncommon. He was fairly shitty as a horse. Like, he'd bite, he didn't like to be touched, he wanted you to fuck off all the time, he just wanted to be left alone, he wasn't right fussy. Generally just an angry person. And we knew he had some issues, so physical issues, he had allergies, he'd had cellulitis in the past. I can't remember if he'd had ulcers in the past or not, but he'd had quite a lot of prodding and poking in his time, and yeah, he was quite irritable as a horse. He didn't like it when people hung around his stable. He'd bite you. When you were just standing around doing stuff with him, he would bite you and rip your clothes and stuff like that. It could be really quite tricky to be around. So me and Beth, we worked for a long time on his loading course, and we got it done. He was loading beautifully. We took him to Bourne Woods, we took him to an arena hire and did some groundwork with him, and which is when Beth then decided she could probably do with some groundwork sessions as well as the loading after the loading finished. So after that, I continued working with Fernley, because what Fernley seemed to have done was develop a really poor association to touch. And so I've talked about associative learning in one of my other podcasts, and what it is. And so either due to I think it was due to his allergies and probably the amount of needles he had injected in him, trying to find out what was wrong with him and why he was having these allergies. It turned out he was allergic to a lot: cats, ryegrass, insect bites, anything. It was going to be impossible to sterilise his area from the things he was allergic to. So he was on steroid injections. And Fernley was a very nervous horse in general, and he could become really quite difficult to handle, bargy and dragging people when he got uncomfortable on the ground. And under saddle, he'd been taught to park up at the mountain block, but he got really quite agitated with you as you lifted your foot to get on. He'd stamp his feet, his back legs, he'd swish his tail, he'd pin his ears, hollow his black out. And we changed a lot of that through the groundwork, so I got him working on the ground initially. I changed his association to touch, so how he felt about being touched. I changed all of that. And then we started moving him towards the ridden work and changed his association to being ridden. So during the groundwork, I'd line him up to the mountain block, I'd pretend to get on, he'd throw his faces, and if he stepped away, I'd ask him to come again. And then, he eventually just would stand there and go to sleep while you got on him, and he wasn't fussed, he wasn't bothered, and we very slowly managed to change how he felt about being touched, being worked with, having any needles injected into him, and we got him very, very good at standing to be injected for his steroids, to the point where he didn't have to have a head collar on to have his steroids, whereas to start with he needed 2 or 3 people to help, or one person to inject, one person to hold him. I don't know if they ever got to the point of needing 2 people to hold him, but it was becoming very difficult to work with. So through all this, I also learned he wasn't as scary as a lot of people thought he was. Not so much scary, I don't think people thought he was scary, but he was, he had a bit of bravado about him, like I'm this. It's hard to describe him. He had a very hard exterior shell, which looked like he was make him come across as quite aggressive and shitty, when in reality he was very nervous to his core, and didn't know how to handle things very well, and didn't know how to bring himself down when he got stressed. He was very spooky, and we worked with all of that. We got him less spooky, less bargy, even because he was on full livery. So the girls at the yard were saying how much better he was getting to handle. And then, like I said, we transferred that all into the ridden work. We got him ridden nicely. He was moving forwards. Another thing he did under the saddle, was he tripped a lot. He tripped a lot and he had for a big, rangy sport horse, big bay 16-2 sport horse with really nice movement. He had a very short trot on him initially, which I worked with him and got a nice, beautiful big trot. Jesus Christ, that horse could move, but it was really quite intimidating, how big his canter could be and how big his trot could be. And initially I thought maybe he found it intimidating as well and would back off from it, which is why he preferred a short little trot. But he needed pushing out of that short little trot that he was in, because it would cause issues of its own. It was hollowing his back. He wasn't stepping through properly from behind. So if we left him in that tiny closed little trot, a lot of his issues could start to resurface again, because he would start to get uncomfortable in his back, and things like that. Oh, and during all this, at some point, Beth put a stop to him getting treats and stuff, because he was biting a lot of people. I think it was during the loading course that she put a stop to his treats, and I said to start using treats for things that he really struggles with to stand for, like his steroids and things like that, and that's how we solved that problem. So we got to a point where Beth was riding him again, and she was doing really well with him. She was having a few struggles with him because she isn't as confident a rider as me, and like I said, his big movement was really quite intimidating, and he was quite an intimidating horse to ride because, like I said, he could trip a lot. He'd tripped a few times, and he was just generally quite a clumsy horse as a person in his personality. But yeah, Beth was getting on really well with him, so this was quite a while after the loading course had finished, and Beth decided to take him out to Sheepgate. So I was umming and ahhing about going with her to Sheepgate for the whole thing, to make sure it went well, but Sheepgate's only an hour from where I live, so we decided that she was going to go on her own, and we were going to see how it went, and if she needed help getting home, I'd come down to help her. So from there, Beth took him to Sheepgate. He loaded fine to go there. I can't remember if she rode or did groundwork at Sheepgate, but he did really well. I think she might have ridden him. I can't remember. Can't remember now. But yeah, she said he did really well. He was fantastic while he was there. They were just having trouble getting him on, so I went down to help them, and we were getting him on and off, and he was doing fine. And then she went up the ramp this one time, and I saw his back end sort of wobble, and it really concerned me. I thought he was going to go down, and so I said to Beth, I said pretty much straight away, I was like, he needs to go home. We need to end this. He needs to go home. No more practice loading. He needs to go. So Beth had already turned around by this point and was ready to come off the ramp with him. So she walked him off, and then I said, but this time we're going to load him up to go. So be prepared. You're going to hold him in there. We're going to shut the partition. We're going to shut him up, and he's going to go home. So we did that, and as we came off the ramp, I mentioned to Beth, I said, have you ever considered wobblers for him? I don't know a lot about it. I didn't know a lot about it at the time. But I said, the only way I can describe what he did was wobbled. I haven't seen any horse with wobblers in my experience personally. I did once as a kid, but it was a long time ago, so I don't know a lot about them from what I can remember. It's largely for young horses. It happens to young horses. It gets spotted fairly early. The horses really struggle and they get put to sleep. Obviously Fernley was 10, 11 years old at this point, so wobblers seemed like a really strange thing for him to have. But hey ho, I talked to them about it. I said something that really concerned me, the way his back end went as he went up the lorry ramp that time. So they took him home, and I think Beth rode him either the next day or the day after. It was the Monday she rode him, and she said something felt really off. Couldn't put a finger on really what it was. It felt like he was falling forwards, like felt really, really weird. And I think she said people around her didn't think he looked wrong. He looked fine. So she asked me to see what I thought the next day. So I rode him on the Tuesday, and again it was really quite scary riding him. He felt like he was falling forwards. It felt very uncomfortable. All his legs weren't really working in the right way, but Fernley had been strange before. I just asked him to move forward and open his stride up, and he came really nicely, and it was really strange. But I asked the people around me if he looked off, and they said no, he looks fine. So I got off him and took him in, and I talked to a few people. I said, I don't know, he felt really off. It felt really weird. I wasn't sure what was going on. I messaged Beth. I said, I rode him. He felt really off. I did push him to see if he'd come out of the weird small trot he was doing, which he did. But I got off him pretty quickly. He didn't seem right to me. And so the next day he had the saddler, who Anna Choma, I think her name is, or I Anna Choma. She's also a physio. I think she's a vet physio or something like that. She's really, really good from what I've seen. And they put him on the lunge, and she was like, no, something's seriously wrong with this horse. And apparently it was like he was really drunk. And so they put him back in, vets got called out, he got diagnosed as ataxic. So yeah, it was pretty serious. He was really wobbly on his feet. So they wanted to get him to the vets. I think they did x-rays at the yard to see how he was, but the x-rays weren't powerful enough to view the parts of his spine that they wanted to see. So he really needed to go into hospital, but with how wobbly he was, getting him into hospital really wasn't an option at that point. So he went on to some box rest, and I think I clipped him in the middle of this as well, because we were very hopeful that this was something fixable and he was going to be all right. So I clipped him because it was around about the time he needed clipping. When he was being worked, he was getting sweaty. He really needed clipping for his skin condition to stop him from coming up in hives. So we clipped him, and again he was all right, but he'd often end up falling forwards and couldn't stop. He struggled to turn. We got him clipped. He did Olivia did a really good job of clipping him. I was just there to make sure he behaved himself, really. And then he came right a bit, so he went on box rest. He came a bit right, and then we took him to the vets. So I went down to load him to get him to the vets. He still wasn't brilliant. It was quite difficult to load him to get him to the vets. There were a couple of times he was a bit wobbly on his feet. It's a lot of the tools I have for an emergency loading situation I didn't have access to with him being so unstable on his feet. So I had to be very careful what I did with him to make sure he stayed on his feet, and we still got him on the lorry. Which I did. I got him on. They took him to Oakham. They got him off at Oakham. I think he spent a week in Oakham, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more, give or take, a few days. And then he started to feel better. Again, they got x-rays. His spine seemed clear, but the one place they thought that the wobblers might be, it was around his pelvis area, and there was too much muscle from the outside to be able to get a clear view of that area. And when they tried to do an internal x-ray to that area, it was too far away to be able to get a clear view of the bones that they were wanting to look at. So that didn't really give us any clue as to what was happening. But he was starting to feel better. It was starting to get really quite difficult for the vets to handle. So, and Beth wanted to bring him home, for better or worse. She wanted him home to be comfortable at home. So I went down to Oakham and loaded him up to come home, and holy shit, that was one of the hardest loading sessions. That is easily the hardest loading session I've ever had in my life. He was a lot more wobbly than when I'd loaded it. I don't think it was that he was more wobbly. I think it was that this was now the second time I was loading him without the ability to turn him. And so he got wise to that, and he was getting strong, and he was dragging me about, and God, he was difficult. So he got sedated, and then he went completely to sleep. We couldn't move him anywhere. He just fell asleep on the ramp, and we tried seeing if we could walk him up the ramp one leg at a time. And I put my shoulder onto the back of his thigh, because he was a big horse, so to try and push him forwards a bit while Beth put some pressure on and some cues at the front, and he just sat on me. So that was painful. He just sat on me, and then I was worried that if I moved, that he might not just stand on his own 2 feet and he might just fall over. So yeah, that was fun being sat on by a horse, but we move on. I did eventually got him on. He went on. It was difficult. It probably, in my memory, it probably lasted longer than I actually did. I was out of breath doing that. He was from the get-go, he'd always been a very difficult horse to do anything with. And now he knew I was being careful. That's always the tricky one. Once a horse clocks on to the fact that you're being careful and you don't want to upset them, they've kind of got one over on you because they've got a place they're willing to go to that you're not, to get out of this. And like I said, we got him on. We got him loaded, I think. Yeah, so once we got him on, he tried to barge his way back out. And we just had to force him in. There was no way in hell I was letting that horse come back out. He tried to force his way back out, and I just made lots of noise, flapping my arms in his face. He was going to go back into that lorry because he very nearly got out again. But I was like, we can fix this problem another day. We just need him to get home now. And so yeah, we got him home. He settled in at home. He did all right. They created a small paddock for him at the field because he wasn't one that was just going to stay in his stable the entire time on his box rest while he recovered. So yeah, he and then I went to say goodbye. I went to see him because I think it very much just got decided that it wasn't going to go his way, and even if he did recover to a point where he could retire in a field, his owner wanted a horse that she could ride. She couldn't afford to have a horse that couldn't be ridden and a horse that she wanted to ride and a horse that she could ride as well. And rehoming, and Fernley's only 11, so it's not like it would have been a couple of years or it. And the other issue is she couldn't send Fernley to a retirement home because with the type of horse he is, there was a damn good chance that at some point someone would get hold of that horse, bring him back into work, and potentially try to sell him as a hunter or try to take him hunting and not take his health issues seriously. Because he was a beautiful horse. He'd be a beautiful hunt horse. Something along those lines. Or even dressage, anything along those lines. Just some sort of ridden work. Someone could decide to try and bring him back into work and potentially sell him for quite a lot of money. Only for him to maybe collapse on someone one day. And regardless of the risk of that, Beth didn't want him in that. Yeah, it was a really difficult situation, and Beth made the right choice. But it'd been decided that she was going to put him down, and from there, I think he suddenly went downhill again. I don't really know why. I can't remember why. But he suddenly went downhill again, and I think he nearly fell on one of the members of staff in the stable while they were trying to do work around him in the stable. And that was where Beth made the decision that he was too dangerous now and his health had declined too far to be safe for anyone around him, and it really wasn't his fault, and it was really stressing him out and upsetting him, this whole thing. So Beth got the vet out to make the call that it was the right thing to do. Vet agreed that it was the right thing to do, and only for insurance purposes, because apparently insurance don't pay out unless the vet gives the okay for that, gives the yes to the horse being put down, and it's not the decision of the owner. So Fernley, bless him, yeah, that was Fernley's life. Unfortunately, he was a quirky character, really quirky character, and I've spoken to Beth. I checked that she was okay with me posting about this, and she said she likes people talking about him and likes him hearing him being talked about, and if he can help anyone in the future, then brilliant, because what's the point in going through all that pain and heartache with these horses if it doesn't help anyone in the future? If there's nothing else, Fernley taught a lot of people a lot of lessons. I really do believe that he did. Fantastic. He was a fantastic horse. He taught me a lot. He pushed me to the brink when it came to patience. Fucking hell. Just the sheer length of time it took him to learn in general really pushed my patience. He was a very frustrating horse to work with. I loved him to bits. He was fucking awesome. It was fun to ride. It was a beautiful mover. He tried really hard. Once I got through to him and I got through that hard exterior that he had and got down to the actual problem of him being nervous, he tried really hard. Despite the things that he struggled with, because obviously we didn't know he had a neurological issue until the end, really. So he did a bloody good job working for me and doing all the things that he did. And from the horse I met at the start that was constantly telling you to fuck off, get away from me, don't touch me, don't come near me, don't you dare, yeah, all that really nasty behaviour that he showed. And towards the end he was really playful, he was really cuddly, you could spend time with him, you could stand in front of his stable and give him a cuddle, play with his nose, he'd play with his zip and stuff like that. He was a really happy person, so I always feel a little bit bad with Fernley because obviously I didn't know what was going on with him. No one knew what was going on with him, and it's not through any lack on Beth's part of treatments and trying to find out what was going on, because that horse had vets, physios, different types of physios. She had a horse communicator, Reiki, like I said, she had that Anna come out with the saddle fitter, she had equine touch done on it. That horse had so much care put into him to make sure he was physically comfortable. I don't think anyone else would have spotted the problems that he had, because they just didn't present themselves until they did, and then it became quite serious quite quickly, unfortunately, with him. Nothing that a 5-stage vetting would show up, anything like that. It was really unfortunate, and yeah, but Fernley's in a better place now, bless him. We tried our best for him. We learnt a hell of a lot, because I always felt like something wasn't quite right with Fernley. Just with the amount of things he struggled with, there was always this niggling feeling that something wasn't quite right with him. But at the end of the day, he was under a lot of care from a lot of different professionals. I wasn't the only professional involved in this horse, and who am I as a horse trainer to say that something's physically wrong with a horse when he's got vets, physios and everyone else saying that he's fine, because he was fine and he wasn't presenting any issues. It was the way he learned that made me think something wasn't quite right, or maybe to say that more correct, that how difficult he found it to learn was really quite telling. And I learned a hell of a lot about wobblers. For a start, I learned a hell of a lot about wobblers syndrome and different neurological issues, because Jesus Christ, I spent hours and whole evenings trying to talk with AI through things and Googling things and trying to figure out what the fuck could be wrong with him. I found some disease that they get from possum shit. It was so the rabbit holes we all went down to try and figure out what the fuck was wrong with him, because wobblers seemed very unlikely. And I think Beth was on about, she thought about donating his body to be studied to find out what was wrong with him and maybe do an autopsy, but that required him to be travelled to the place first, and with his condition we didn't feel like it was fair to ask him to travel and to go on a lorry again, or safe. There was a good chance he'd go down while travelling or trying to load, and the last thing we wanted for Fernley was to be put down for going down. it wanted to be a day where Beth decided to do it, and she made the right choice. She didn't get forced into any decisions by Fernley being unable to get up. I saw him a few days before he died. He was quite happy in himself. He was just very wobbly. It was, don't go in the stable really unless you had to with him, because he was just so unstable on his feet. So I just had a cuddle with him outside the front of his stable, and then left him alone really, had a little chat with him. And so that's Fernley's story and how I met him, and his owner Beth, who's still a really good friend of mine. If you saw the post I put on Facebook, they bought me a beautiful present from a little love heart with Fernley's tail in a beautiful wooden frame with a plaque underneath it. Fernley, the horse that tested my patience, and by God did that fucking horse test my patience. But yeah, it was a sad one, but I'm happy to have known him and happy to have been able to help him, really. I love that horse. He was mint. Yeah. Rest in peace, Fernley. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. I will see you on the next one.